Of Syria and its relationship with the U.S. and the international community. Let's bring in Wael Alzayat, who served as a U.S. Middle East policy expert at the U.S. Department of State for a decade and is also the CEO of Engage Action, a Muslim advocacy organization. Wael, thank you for joining us tonight and bearing with us through some of that breaking news earlier. We really appreciate it. We heard President Biden say earlier today, or yesterday rather, that the collapse of the government under Bashar al-Assad was a, quote, fundamental act of justice. He also said that it was a, quote, moment of risk and uncertainty. Do you agree with President Biden on that? And from your perspective, what does the fall of Assad mean for everyday Syrians?
Well, there's certainly a lot of truth. It's not just a fundamental act of justice, but also courage on the part of the Syrian people who have suffered for half a century under one of the most brutal regimes ever known. And I know in your segment, you covered that in terms of what's been revealed and will be revealed from the dungeons of the Syrian regime. What it means moving forward, though, is that really right now it's a moment of truth for the international community as well as the United States. When I served in government, I know that under the Obama administration and really under the Trump and then the Biden administration, there was uncertainty regarding what may come next if Assad falls. And I think that prevented the United States from having a coherent policy in support of a democratic transition in Syria. And so moving forward, I think right now there's an opportunity by both the Biden and the incoming Trump administration to revisit the file and to look at ways to be constructive and certainly, hopefully, to do no harm, because our ability sometimes to mess up in the Middle East are well documented.
Mm-hmm. What do you hope to see from the United States and some of our allies in the coming weeks in particular?
Look, the first thing is the political transition. The Syrians have to get that right, and it has to be Syrian-led. This is not about America. It's not about any other country. It's about Syrians. However, the international community, the United States, Turkey certainly, some of the Arab partners, some European nations, really have a role to play here to be supportive of a peaceful, inclusive, and diverse process that encompasses all of Syria's stakeholders. It's a very diverse country. The second piece is economic assistance. The country is in dire needs of rebuilding, and now Assad is gone. So the set of sanctions that have been levied on the country since the 1970s need to go. However, I'm sure there's going to need to be some conditions and some accountability vis-a-vis the new powers that be on the ground. But that economic piece is so important. And if we don't do it quickly, you can have chaos and a general breakdown in order, which would undermine our other priorities, which is countering terrorism, making sure there's stability, and safeguarding of important institutions.
Do you anticipate a shift in U.S. policy just in the way that we would speak to a new Syrian government? I mean, you mentioned the rebels and the rebel group that is credited with toppling Assad and now seems to be in control of Syria is HTS. And they are, as Raf Sanchez and others mentioned in their reporting, designated as a terror group in the United States. And the U.S. actually has a $10 million bounty on its leader, al-Jolani. But al-Jolani, HTS, and the United States do very clearly have enemies in common now. So do you think there could be a reassessment of who Jolani is? I mean, has Jolani and HTS changed in your research over the years?
I imagine that reassessment is underway right now, and it may not be complete until the new Trump administration takes office. And they're going to need to do their own assessments as well. But there's a few facts here. One is, as you mentioned, Jolani and his organization severed ties with al-Qaeda a few years ago. But more importantly, beyond the perhaps symbolic break, is since they have taken Damascus and the other cities, they have come out with some pretty incredible announcements that need to be obviously tested, but regarding protection of minorities, of women's rights, and of inclusive transition. Now, I think it's upon them to prove it in acts and in deeds. So far, so good, as we say, but we absolutely should be not only cautious, but leveraging some of the items I mentioned, which is the sanctions and their lifting, perhaps the designation of this organization, economic assistance, political support, contingent on a democratic transition that is inclusive and representative of Syria's diverse communities.
And talk to me, too, about where you think Syrians are, everyday people, right now, in terms of what they may be thinking, how they may be processing this shift. So much of the world has looked at Syria, and in the United States in particular, as a place of sorrow where individual civilians were so mistreated. And I mean, we cannot overstate the egregious human rights violations that have occurred under Bashar al-Assad, particularly in the last decade plus during this civil war. So for the average Syrian, what do you think this moment means right now?
I mean, I am an American, but also I was born and raised in Damascus. My family immigrated when I was a teenager. I've experienced some of the terror and fear instilled by regimes like the Assad regime. It is surreal. It is emotional. It is incredible. It's beautiful, but also uncertain. And I think this was a necessary step that the Syrian people needed to take, irrespective of the challenges ahead.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, for being here. We really appreciate all of your insights tonight. Wael Alzayat, CEO of Engage Action. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. We're going to be right back.